Believe it or not, these are some of the rarest diesel locomotives pulling freight in the United States, and this short line railroad has a whole fleet of them. But coming up, these are not the only unusual locomotives we'll see. This one is having an identity crisis. These are rusting away in a railroad graveyard, and this one has been stuffed and mounted. But they all help to tell the story of the upstate in South Carolina and the Pickens Railway. All that and more is next. Out of the darkness and into the light. It's hard to miss these bright orange locomotives. They have a distinctive look and a distinctive sound. And if you want to see these old G's pulling freight, you'll have to come to Anderson, South Carolina. That's where you'll find the Pickens Railway, a 28.5-mile long, family-owned and operated short line. We'll start our journey around 5 miles to the south of downtown Anderson. This part of South Carolina is known as the Upstate, which includes major cities like Greenville, Spartanburg, Clemson, and Greer. The crew of this train is finishing up switching cars at some of the railroad's customers. Soon, they'll be headed north toward the railroad's interchange with Norfolk Southern. Here in town, another train crew is switching cars. This is the Belton job, and we just saw the Anderson job. It's an interesting setup here. The tracks actually go under the city. And if you're lucky, you'll see both trains working side by side. All 4 of these engines are General Electric U18Bs from the early 1970s. And we'll talk about what makes them so special a little later. This is where the Pickens Railway interchanges with Norfolk Southern. There's not a whole lot of real estate out here, so the 2 crews have to work together to get their jobs done. There's no doubt, these old engines are showing their age, but they still seem to pull pretty well. I should mention, it's a hot day in June of 2025 and there's no air conditioning in these cabs. Alright, it's now time to get this train out on the main line. They're headed to Belton, which is around 15 miles to the east of Anderson. Like I mentioned earlier, it's hot today, and that front cab door is wide open for some natural air conditioning. To my untrained eye, the railroad appears to be well maintained. The train goes pretty slow, but there's no rocking and rolling like you may see on some other short line railroads. The route they're on dates back to the mid-1800s. Most recently, it was operated by Norfolk Southern, but that ended in the mid-1990s. And here's the train going by the old Southern Railway Depot in Belton. Okay, the train is now approaching its interchange with the Greenville and Western Railway in Belton. The conductor will have to throw a switch before they can enter the yard. But first, the Greenville and Western crew gets its engines in position to help with switching. The lead locomotive here is a General Motors Electromotive Division GP30, originally built for the Santa Fe in 1963. With those engines in position, the Pickens train can now head into the yard. There are a lot of classics out here today. Now, the Greenville and Western interchanges with CSX, so it's a good connection for the Pickens to have. They've also got some interesting equipment in their yard. This GP30 is still showing off its Santa Fe heritage. It was originally built in 1962. Parallel to the yard, Pickens rails run southeast past Belton around 6 miles to Honia Path. On the way, this locomotive graveyard. And there are some real classics in here. I'm talking about diesels built by the American Locomotive Company, or ALCO, end-cap switchers made by Electromotive Division, and number 9501, which was built in 1974. Although very faded, it still wears lettering from its previous owner, CSX. That company used these GE U18Bs for maintenance of way service and painted all of them in bright orange. This one has obviously been scavenged for parts to keep other Pickens locomotives running. It's certainly not going to roll out of here anytime soon. Its trucks are also missing. Okay, so now we need to talk about what makes these General Electric U18Bs so special. Well, first of all, number 9508 isn't even all GE. The trucks here were once under a General Motors Electromotive Division locomotive. This was actually a relatively common practice. Sometimes a railroad would trade in older locomotives and the trucks would be refurbished and reused. Now, GE introduced this locomotive type back in 1973. It was part of the company's Universal series and was intended to be a branch line road switcher. It's powered by an 1,800 horsepower, 4-stroke, 8-cylinder diesel engine, and that's pretty small for a modern freight locomotive. In fact, these U18Bs were called baby boats. If you didn't know, locomotives in GE's Universal series were often called U-boats. But these so-called baby boats weren't big sellers for GE. A little more than 150 were made. The ones in use here can trace their roots back to the Seaboard Coastline Railroad, and the Pickens Railway acquired them from CSX back in 2000. On this day in April 2025, you can see the crew switching cars at the Pickens interchange with Norfolk Southern right outside downtown Anderson. And if you want a smoke show, this is the place to be. As you can see, number 9502 actually has GE trucks, but this is only part of the fleet. Today, the rest were tied down at the railroad shop. Those dark blue engines are ex-CSX GE B40-8s. They're more modern than the U18Bs and produce more horsepower. So after watching all this, you might be wondering, why is this railroad called the Pickens? Well, to understand why, we'll have to travel 30 miles north of Anderson to Pickens, South Carolina. Here, you'll find the remains of a line that ran from Pickens to Easley and was nearly 10 miles long. The Pickens Railroad was chartered way back in 1890 by the South Carolina General Assembly. One of its biggest customers was Singer Manufacturing. That company built a sewing machine cabinet plant next to the tracks in the 1920s. And Singer would eventually acquire the railroad in 1939. But it would change hands a few more times after that. Railroad operations on the line ceased in 2013. It's now a walking and biking trail. But they haven't forgotten about their history here in Pickens. The old depot and a beautifully restored boxcar and a Baldwin VO 660 are still here. Built in 1945, this engine was originally Singer Manufacturing number 2. Of course, Baldwin was well known for its steam locomotives, but its diesels never really caught on. So obviously, Singer Manufacturing was a big customer and later owner of the Pickens, but what does the present-day railroad haul? According to the Pickens Railway website, the company ships things like silica, paper, scrap paper, plastics, wood pulp, farm supplies, electrical equipment, limestone, synthetic rubber, and rubber processing oil. And you may have heard of one of its customers. Michelin makes tires here in Anderson, in this case, really big ones. I mean, let's face it, size matters. The smaller engines and lower horsepower on these Pickens locomotives may actually save the railroad maintenance and fuel costs. And let's hope they are still pulling freight for many more years to come. Now, you've probably seen a U18B before, you just didn't know it. If you've ever watched the 1993 film The Fugitive, starring Harrison Ford, you may remember this crash scene. The locomotive leading this train that hits the prison bus is a GE U18B. And believe it or not, the engine is still sitting in North Carolina where they filmed that scene on the Great Smoky Mountains Railroad. Anyway, that's it for now. I'd encourage you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. We hit 100,000 this year, and I hope to keep that momentum going. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.